Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir, the first book in the Locked Tomb trilogy. This was a Hugo shortlister this year, and the second book, Harry the Ninth, has also been Hugo shortlisted this year. Also won the Locus Award for Best First Novel. I'll be doing plot, review, spoiler bits I liked, spoiler bits I didn't like. It's all going to be marked on the time bar. Don't forget to click around. An immortal emperor leads his empire of 9 planets, on each of which a variant strain of necromancy is practiced, fueled by Thanagy, the echo of the living after their death. The Emperor leads 8 lictors, immortal necromancer rulers, and an undead army known as the Cohort, against his enemies, but after thousands of years, their numbers are dwindling. The Emperor puts out an invitation to the heirs of the 9 houses and their chosen champions, the Cavaliers, to attend a trial through which new lictors will be chosen to serve the throne. We follow Gideon Nav, who was adopted by the 9th house as a child, a house created to guard the locked tomb of the Emperor's greatest enemy. Constantly trying to get off-world and escape, she strikes a deal with the heir to the 9th house, Harahak Nonagesimus, to be her cavalier to attend the trial in exchange for her freedom, her erasure of debts and obligations. So they travel to the homeworld of the first house, to an immense, crumbling, rotting mansion called Canaan House. But what are the trials? How do they work? How many lictors will be chosen? Are the 8 houses working together, or are they working against each other? How will Gideon and Harrow overcome their hatred for one another? And what are the secrets hidden in Canaan House's deep bowels? This book really subverted my expectations about what a book of necromancy would be like. Just because necromancy thematically and aesthetically is very dark, it doesn't mean it has to come from an evil place. It doesn't mean it has to be used for bad. And this book showcases that an umbrella term like necromancy has so many different facets to explore. It's really amazing when you go into a book with this idea in your head about how a magic system works, because you've been seeing it almost underused everywhere else, just based on your experience of it in other things, and have the rug completely pulled out from underneath you. But this book totally does lean into the Gothic. It's very Gormenghast, and it is fantastic to see that in a sci-fi fantasy setting. Being set so far in the future with cathedrals and spires, this for me felt very similar to Dune in some ways, very similar to Warhammer 40k, and also kind of like Chronicles of Riddick. Having this kind of story with this backdrop, you do need to be kind of overly descriptive and flowery with your scene setting. And I've heard a mixed response to that in terms of how people felt about it. Some people were like, there wasn't enough description. Other people were like, everything is so overly described. I think for me going in, I had such a concrete visual of what everything looked like. But I honestly don't know that whether that's from the book having given it to me, or whether it's from preconceptions I had about what the book would be like that I just kind of stuck with. I do tend to imagine what I like and ignore things the book is handing to me on a plate, which is like my toxic reading trait. With that kind of story though, it's often painted as science so far advanced that it may as well be magic, so it's kind of is magic. And one thing I really liked about this is that it's never painted as anything other than magic. They don't try and deny it, and Muir doesn't try and give a scientific explanation for everything. Yes, it's magic with a lot of rules, it's magic with a lot of different pieces that fit together, and it takes work and practice, but I like that the author doesn't necessarily try and fully root it in the reality we know, and more uses the backdrop, the time period, and the storyline to make this sci-fi instead of the mechanics and the tiny details of what's going on. Weirdly, speaking of genres though, this kind of did have an Agatha Christie dinner party mystery vibe to it. Lots of people locked together in the same house. You're trying to figure out the motivations of everybody, who's behind what's going on. There are very few books I read where the main character is my favourite character, but I love Gideon. I hear a lot of criticisms about language, style chosen, and humour, with a lot of it being snark, sarcasm, humour built around digging, fun, and being a bit mean. I think it's more similar to British, Australian humour than American humour, maybe. It can be a bit exhausting and a bit edgy to read a character that is constant snark and constant sarcasm, but I feel the characters around Gideon really helped keep that in check. they reined her in, showed that that behaviour wasn't necessarily the best, with her having constant snidey little digs and other people being like, you need to stop, you need to take this seriously. So it's interesting to have a main character that uses humour almost as a defence mechanism to stop people getting close. The background of Harrow and Gideon both did a lot for the world building in this book, in that they're both from the ninth house, which is very cut off and very secluded. They don't know the machinations of what's going on in the rest of the universe around them. And the other houses know they don't know, so the world build is revealed to us, along with Gideon and Harrow, very, very slowly, because you're thrown in with somebody who knows nothing. And while this is not a slow book by any means, your understanding of how the world works, getting built up and built up and built up, is a very slow aspect of this book. I love Muir's world building. I'm very hungry for the history of how the world got to this point. Secondary world building is really almost a cherry on the top for me, usually. But here I feel like it's an integral part of the scaffolding of how everything fits together. And I want to know more. Some little bits I really liked. These are going to be spoilers. Turn away now if you don't want this spoiled. Firstly, I thought this book did its gay rep really well. I love when representation happens, but the fact a character is gay, the fact that they're part of a gay experience, is not integral to the storyline. Gideon is gay, but it really doesn't have any bearing on anything. Nobody cares, it's not that important. There are other much more interesting things about Gideon as a character, and that's really the way to build characters. That's the way rep should work, and that's something that sci-fi does honestly very well. Probably better than other genres. IMO. I usually am not invested in romance subplots, and I think there's not in this one a romance subplot so much as a slow progression of mutual respect, final understanding that leads to a relationship becoming more. It's about resentment and something that's nothing more than acquaintance taking that next step once you pass a boundary. I think it progressed in a really natural way. And when the one tiny little romantic thing did happen, I was like, yes! Yes! Because it was done so well, I was completely here for it. It made me even more invested in the safety of the main characters, which is the way you should be using romance. Suddenly, it's not the same. Suddenly, Gideon has a hell of a lot more to lose. I love the idea when Harrow describes necromancy about how it seems almost like coding, as a corpse reanimated by a series of commands, a series of prompts, a series of lines. So a skilled necromancer can not only reanimate more corpses, but can make them do more complicated, more interesting things. But just the magic system in this world, the variants of necromancy were brilliant. You have the ninth house skeleton reanimation, other houses breeding humans as necromantic batteries, other houses fueling their power with cannibalism, with blood, still others perfecting healing and disease through their necromantic understanding of a corpse. I was blown away by Muir's inventiveness and originality. I've never read anything like this before, where such a niche piece of magic is expanded so fantastically. I spoke about in the previous bit where I thought that Gideon's, through no fault of her own, naivety helped us get a more organic, slow building of the world. But I think there was another way that Gideon was used really well to build stories about the characters around them. For a large part of this book, she is bound to silence by Harrow. So there is a very long period of just observation and just internal monologue on Gideon's part. Gideon susses out everybody else. You see their reactions to her just based on who she is, not what she does or what she says. You see that prejudice come out. And that whole bit of the book makes it richer as a whole because you're waiting for her to finally snap and just lash out. I think that was a great choice. I also think this book was served to be adapted into a movie really well because I think you could infer so much about what was going on from appearance, from tone, from the sets. Movie adaptation, please. I'm here for it. A few bits I wasn't too keen on, or that may be barriers to other people stepping into this book. First and biggest hurdle in this book that made some sections a bit of a slog was the absolutely humongous cast. There are 9 houses, there are 2 or 3 important people in each house. The amount of times I had to flip back to the front of the book to the who's who people list was insane. And it doesn't help that each character is referred to at different times by different people by their first name, by their surname, their house name, by their nickname, it's definitely hard to keep track of. It's okay, but when you're doing that for like 15 plus characters, it can be like, wait, who said that? What's going on? Who's this guy? Also, as all of these houses' motivations and their abilities are revealed, obviously the book would want to showcase those abilities, but it does mean that the fight scenes and conflicts as the book goes on get more and more and more complicated, to the point where by the end of the book I really had to slow down the speed I was reading at just so I could keep track of what was happening in a high speed scene. Probably the weirdest thing about this book for me was how much it is let down by the blurb. I don't think the blurb does it any justice at all, and it feels almost like the blurb is written to trick YA readers into reading this book, because the vibe of the blurb is not the vibe of the book at all. I made a lot of assumptions about the book from the blurb, and it's the reason that I didn't read it for such a long time. And I think if it hadn't been a book club read as part of the Interstellar Book Club, I probably would never have picked it up, which would have been a shame. I think if this book got a better blurb, the fandom would be bigger. It would have a bigger following, because the right people would be reading it to love it. But despite those little nitpicks, I'm going to give this book 5 stars because it was amazing, and because I give a hell of a lot of points for originality. Tamsyn Muir's imagination must be just off the wall insane. I'm very impressed. And I cannot wait to see what else they churn out. Where this story goes in book 2 and book 3. Stay tuned, I will be reading them and I will be talking about them. So thanks very much for watching this review. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more single book reviews coming thick and quick. I read pretty fast. Don't forget to follow me on Goodreads and Twitter, which I'll link down below. And if you like sci-fi, don't forget to join our Interstellar Book Club, which I'll link down below too. And I'll see you soon for the next one. Bye.